the trolling trust grow from a scene, and it shouldn't rise from the edge. We undo and suffer, lose and bleed, still we crash against the sky. You and I, we like the reeds, chasing fate, it's coming to creep. Clear the darkness and seize the light. Daybreak's meant to be fair. We are gonna shine the tide.
Hey guys, MrPokke here, and I've been overworking every single goddamn day for the past 2 weeks. And today, I do believe this will mark my final video about Hyacine, as we are going to be going through everything that we have discovered with her for the past, I would say, 3 to 4 full days of testing running her kit. We have tried it out from the pools, the 1 versus 2000, the early access guides, the CN guides, every single DPS, random infinite blade words, 0 cycles, everything that could be done, it has been done, as I've done for every single unit. I think ever since Elysia, right? I've been doing this final thoughts thing ever since Elysia, except for Caceres. I didn't do my final thoughts for Caceres because my final thoughts are basically, if you pull for her, you have no morals. So we don't really need a video about that. It would be just 10 seconds long. But let's just talk about my final thoughts about Hyacine, right? So we're just gonna be wrapping everything up into this nice little video. Before you put in every kind of stuff, you can just take a look at all of the here. Your editor just slap all the thumbnails here. And let's just jump in. So first things first, the biggest question, the biggest and probably the most important question, has she met my expectations as a version 3 sustain? Because outside of all of her synergies with Caceres, right, I think it is undeniable she is absolutely designed with Caceres in mind. She works perfectly. Give her all the new buff, and I don't need to glaze this entire team for like the 10,000th time, so I'm just gonna skip through all that. But has she met my expectations as a version 3 sustain? Me personally, I feel that from a pure sustain convert perspective, I would just say I have not yet faced a situation where I needed a global passive for my team so far. This is not really the case for a couple of other sustains, abundant sustains, specifically Huan. I would say that at least in this job, right, like this is like the job entry bare minimum requirement. Can she keep your team alive comfortably? Right, it's not about keeping your team alive, it's about keeping your team alive comfortably as a 5-star limited sustain. I would say so far she has ticked all of the criteria for that. I've ran with a lot of different team comps, a lot of different ways to play her, all the kind of stuff. And we do want to see a little bit more going forward into the future, what the different APOC shadow is going to be in 2 days time, as well as the Pure Vision and Memory of Chaos reset. Then we'll see if she's going to be cooking up her role outside of Caceres' team, as a role from a version 3 sustain, since she is going to be our first ever version 3 sustain. So with that out of the way, there are a couple of things that I would like to see more, not from Hyacine specifically, but just a couple of potential outlook that we can go to expect for more sustains in the future. Because I believe Hyacine herself, she sort of sets a brand new benchmark where sustains are no longer just about like generalized utility, right? Because if you want to take a look at how our time has evolved with sustains, in version 1, it was more so like, okay, if you can keep your team alive, it's good enough. Luocha had a bit of the Dispel, which till this day, we didn't really see too much of a use other than the Traffic Light. Fu Xuan gave you the free crit rate and damage mitigation, but outside the free crit rate, her general usage was to basically keep your team alive. So that was roughly the sustain that we had in version 1, right? Then in version 2, we got, okay, I guess Huan is also version 1, but like from version 1 and half of version 1 going into version 2, we started to see a lot more sustains that have general utility, right? General usage that could give you more than just keeping your team alive. So Huan with the 40% attack buff, 20% energy regeneration, Avenger with the follow-up attack stacks, increased crit damage, the shield which increases effective HP as well as the debuff, effect rest, and then Lingsha, you know, she's basically a break DPS. She might as well just be a break DPS. So Hyacine for this specific version 3 sustain, in my opinion, she sort of opens up the possibility that we've had DPS, right? We have a general DPS like Jingliu, and then we've started getting more and more niche DPS for like a niche team setup. Then we also started to see more generalized supports, right? We have general supports, or at least back in those days when Rame was first launched, when Super was not a thing, she was a very general support, right? Sparkle was a very general support, and eventually we started getting more and more niche. I feel like sustains might also go down the similar path where a specific sustain would just work very, very well with a specific team comp. Technically, Aventrin sort of did that by himself with follow-up team, and Lingsha did that for the break team. But the difference is, Lingsha had this thing called Gallagher. Aventrin, I would say that specific niche with the follow-up attacks is probably what made follow-up, in my opinion, one of the more popular team comps in version 2. But for Lingsha specifically, because you had the replacement of Gallagher, it was not that she was like that desperate of a improvement, because we still see to this day, you know, Lingsha is a Gallagher side grade, Gallagher is a Lingsha side grade. But at the end of the day, if you wanna like, there are ways to debate this, right? Whereas for Hyacine, it's like there really isn't a lot of situations where you would ever want to run Gallagher or any other sustains over Hyacine in a casual team, because she's just that synergistic. She might as well just be a Jiao to Akron. She might as well just be a Sunday to Aglia, right? Because Casuis herself as a unit, she is not just the kid itself, right? Not just because, you know, she gives her new but just Casuis herself, she needs, like, she has to have a sustain. Unlike a lot of the other DPS teams, you could run sustainers. You can run sustainers Super Break, you can run sustainers crit DPS, you can run sustainers a lot of different, but for Casuis, you absolutely have to have a sustain. And because of this reliance on the sustain slot 4, I feel like Hyacine in this particular instance sets a very, very high bar for a value that a sustain can provide to a unit, right? So with that being said, her position in the current banner, right? So we do know by now this is version 3.3. After Hyacine is going to be Cypher, and after Cypher is going to be version 3.4. I would say that the current positioning of her banner is a little bit tight. Not very, very tight, because it's at least not the same time as Cypher, right? It's a little bit tight with what's coming in 3.4, especially if you're somebody that wants to go all in for probably most likely a limited collaboration with Fate, as well as Finon. I have no idea what he does, but these two, they might be powerhouses of a banner, so there's a little bit of a leeway. I would say that for players that, you know, skipped not Casuis, but like Tribi, right? And a lot of the other supports that we have been getting, basically Tribi, I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if they slap on a Tribi rerun in version 3.4. Because 3.4 is looking to be a pretty big update for HSR. Because on top of the Fate Collab, on top of Finon, we also have 4 units getting reworked, which may or may not bring it up to like a completely different scale in terms of performance with a lot of the version 1, 2, and 3 DPS, right? So in this environment, there might be a very good chance that there might be a 3B rerun. Since they just reran Hertai and Aglia, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they reran a 3B at my day, the very, very next half, right? So at that point, then you sort of, it's real, very difficult to say, okay, should I pull for Hyacine, or should I pull for like a potentially game-breaking support? That is going to be true, because let's just be real, Tribi has been used with every single team, right? Like quite literally every single team in version 3, almost every single team in version 2, and might as well every single team in version 1, right? She is just that synergistic, that good, and especially with like the amount of dedication that she has bring to the table, the E1 Tribi, like even if you have Tribi, what if you want an E1 Tribi, right? So it can be a little bit difficult to decide. I would say at the end of the day, it really boils down to, okay, first of all, there are 2 groups of people, right? People that own Casuis, people that don't own Casuis. For people that own Casuis, I would say, as of this point, right? As of this point, Casuis is a little bit reminiscent of Akron back in those days. Like Akron back when version 2 first launched, she didn't really need anyone specifically because she was just that strong. And when Jiao Qiu first released, if people skipped Jiao Qiu back then, you wouldn't feel the impact immediately. And I would say Casuis and Hyacine shares a potentially a very similar situation, where because Casuis right now, she's so strong, right? Everybody thinks Casuis is probably busted, especially for the casual player base. If you don't really know how the meta shifts or the endgame environment, you might think, oh my god, why is my Casuis so fucking busted when you're up against the Pollux boss, which is literally designed for casuals. And then like 2 or 3 cycles later for Mock, for APOC, and Pure Vision, then you'll start to notice that, oh shit, wait, why is my casuals not as strong anymore? Right? And at that point, you gotta decide, okay, do you think you need Hyacine in the casuals team to make her feel strong again as compared to this current point? So right now, right, if you're a casuals main and you pulled for Hyacine right now, you will feel this unbelievable amount of like power in your account, because it is like the prime time for casuals and the prime time for Hyacine. It is quite literally at their peak against this Pollock's boss, right? But going forward, no matter you put or did not put for Hyacine, I would say that, and this has happened to pretty much every single team in HSR now, eventually the strength that you feel in this current point of time, it will eventually slowly start to go down, because they will want to push for other team comps, right? Other DPS, other team comp, they are probably going to be pushing for Finon, they are probably going to be pushing for the 3x5 unit, they're probably going to be pushing for Fate, and then when all these units comes out, they are still good, right? Casual is still good, but it will never feel as strong as she once was at this point again. With or without Hyacine, I don't think that's going to change. So yeah, just sort of ask yourselves, like, what exactly is your intention if you want to pull Hyacine? If it's because you literally cannot clear Endgame because you didn't pull for a sustain, I don't think Hyacine is going to change it that much. Because Hyacine's utility outside of Castris is not that high. Because she gives you like this comfort, right? She gives you a comfort of sustain, but in terms of overall like energy regeneration, additional damage, additional stacks, it is not gonna be as high. Iga does deal a pretty significant chunk of damage, especially in the MOC right now, because the more you heal against Pollux, the more damage you do. But outside of that, you might not see as much as compared to Casuals. So that's pretty much my 2 cents for whether or not the Casuals users who have been watching the video, you should be considering Hyacine. For non-Casuals users, you can check out my previous video where I just basically test out Hyacine with every single DPS, almost every single DPS for 1.5 hours. You can make your decision from there. Generally speaking, I think my point still sort of stands here. That is also sort of the reason why I think Hyacine just has so much value for Casuals mains, because I think fundamentally it is always about the support in HSR. And Hyacine basically doubled up as a support for Casuals, but she is no longer able to double up as this like support role outside of the Casuals team comp. At E0 S0 especially. At E0 S1, I think you can still run with Aircron for the stacks generation. You can still run her with My Day, with Blade, because you help them gain the charge and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but outside of these kind of different team comps, I would say that her value definitely does go down by quite a decent chunk. And the main goal, I feel, especially for players that are struggling clearing endgame content, whether you are a day 1 player or whether you just start out playing this game, having the sustain that Hyacine is going to be providing, if you take away the support synergy that she's going to be having casters, you will find yourself not having as much value as compared if you just try to pull for a support, for example 3B or 3B E1 or like maybe even Sunday, right, for any along those lines. So that is going to be that. Outside from that, I would say that for her builds, for her light cones, I think we really went through everything that we have talked about. So you guys can just take a look at all of the different videos. I do believe there also was this discussion of whether S1 was more worth or E1 was more worth. At the end of the day, S1 is cheaper. All right, if you want, you can discuss all you want whether E1 gives you like 5%, 10% more damage, but at like really realistically speaking, S1 will always be cheaper than E1. So even if E1 charges your Get Dragon fast and all that kind of stuff, cost-wise, okay, not cost-wise, but like Stellar Jades-wise, this will always be, technically more beneficial for a viewer. I would say you really can't go wrong with whichever you want, either E1 or S1. But I do want to remind one very, very important thing, which is you cannot build pity for Casual's or Cypher's banner if you want to pull a Fate. Because we already know from the announcements that Fate is going to be using a completely different summoning system. So if you want to build pity and you're like, okay, let's just dump like 20, 30 pulls for Hyacine. If I don't get it, I'm just gonna just spend it on the Saber banner. No, it doesn't work that way, right? So you're basically building pity for Finon. And if you don't want Finon and you are dumping your pulls in the Hyacine, thinking that it can be converted to Saber, it doesn't work that way. So just a quick little reminder, I personally, if you want to commit, just commit. If you don't want to commit, something to keep in mind. At least the pity does not go away, right? So you can technically just save this up forever. So if it's not going to be for Saber, if it's not going to be Final, you can technically save forever, but you are still impacting your pools that you could be spending on Saber. assuming that you want to pull for Saber in the first place. Like, imagine if you are missing 20 pulls for Saber, and then you have like 20 PD locked up in the Hyacine banner because you wanted to build PD. So yeah, just something to keep in mind if you want to build PD. For the traders and everything, I don't do anything at all. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry that for the entire showcase, my main account, I've been running this with 4-piece Aggredos, which is not even the best installed, because unfortunately, I don't even have the Relics ready yet. Because yep, I'm a free to play now. Yep, I'm a relatable player now. I don't have enough to cook up enough relics. So do expect like maybe like 5 to 10%, a little bit more healing out performance for your team if you're gonna be running Hyacine, right? Also, quick little note, yeah, I think one of my chat pointed out that the super break Hia team, you should be giving Fuchs buff to Ika instead of Hyacine herself. But why would you even run her in super break? Just stop. Alright, just stop. I'd rather you just run hyper carry Hyacine. Okay, very, very good, right? So that is pretty much it outside of this for the endgame environments. I'm a little bit concerned if the enemies are going to be less AoE focused, because one of the reasons why Hyacine was like so good was because Iga was dealing very, very good damage, but that's because Iga is basically erudition, sort of. If you're up against just a single target, the damage actually falls off like substantially in like one guy. And that also indirectly impacts your 3B energy regeneration, because a lot of times you will see Hyacine being ranked 3B in the same team because they sort of synergize with one another very, very well. So I am a little bit concerned if the environments for the endgame, they start shifting away. And for players that pull for Hyacine thinking, okay, Ika is going to do 1 billion damage, and then like, oh wait, why am I just doing no damage? Because there's only one target. Just keep that in mind. Usually right now, all of the high damages that you guys see is either because Pollark's mechanics is benefiting your Hyacine itself, or it's because it's against AoE, right? So if they do want to continue down the path of like single or like just less targeting in general, which we already see, by the way, which we already see in the form of Hulace 1v1, I don't think it will happen yet in Treatment 4, because from a very, very brief deduction, Phynon is a physical destruction, right? And Saber is a quantum destruction. Right, so at least for that specific patch, it should be bare minimum 3 targets to shield destruction type units. I'm not sure if they will ever shield Archer, because he's like, you know, he's like, why would you shield Daughter ratio? He's free, little bros. He's literally free, you know what I'm saying? So because of these environments, I would say from like 3.5, 3.6, all that kind of stuff, I want to see what sort of environments we're going to be getting, and I wouldn't be too surprised if Casuarys, or rather Hyacine owners outside of Casuarys teams, the damage output from Ika probably will start to go down outside of these kind of stuff, right? So there's a thing I have. And also, speaking about another concern, My Day, right? I think I brought this up multiple times. Essentially, My Day, his single target healing is insufficient. It is straight up insufficient. I didn't run into this issue against the Pollark's boss, because the Pollark's boss actually gives you a lot more healing himself anyways. But in a lot of the other more neutral environments that there's a Maida in like this other MOC bosses, he does have a difficulty of maintaining his health to like a higher than certain percentage level, which means that his full charge cannot be fully utilized. And if in the future we see similar units that requires a specific mechanic, like for example, this unit needs to be like topped up at this health because you want a single target heal, Hyacine is probably not going to be doing that for you, because her heals are basically AoE heal, AoE heal, AoE heal, right? There's no single target heal in her kit anywhere. So future units that make use of this kind of mechanics also need to take into a little bit of a consideration. And this sort of brings me to like another, this is just me cooking, let me cook. They sort of rotated the shilling into abundance units for now, right? They have been shilling a lot of abundance units based on heals, AoE damage, where abundance like really shines. Right now, they are shilling for the abundance AoE environment. What if in the future they start shilling for preservation environment? And what I mean by a preservation environment, I'm referring to bosses that have extremely high single target damage. That would be a little bit rough, because now you don't even need units like Maide, where you need to keep this one specific unit topped up just for Maide's kit. Now, anybody in your team, you sort of need to make sure that if the guy is getting focused non-stop, abundance units will always have a bit of an issue if they're getting focus fired. right? Because abundance, they're like AoE units. They're like AoE, they're AoE healers, right? Preservation is where most of them, they can help you mitigate those single target snipers because they basically raise your effective max HP either from the shields or the damage mitigation. So in the future, if they start to pivot this into that environment and you pull for Hyacine thinking that she's gonna be like the all-purpose version 3 sustain, just be a little bit more wary. Just be a little bit more wary in that regard. Which is why I always say, like, if really you wanted to pull for Hyacine, right? If you at least you have a Castris in that team, she will absolutely still be with Castris. Because they legitimately just synergize so well. And Castris is Pollux. So you're never getting one shot anyways. And you have global passive, right? But if you don't have that, like a lot of the things sort of goes away. And she starts to get into this pitfall of like, do you literally just put for Jiao Qiu to be used with Yunli or with Argenti? Because last time I checked, I don't think anybody in 2025 has been using Jiao Qiu with Yunli or Argenti. And I'm just a little bit concerned that this kind of stuff can happen as you go down the road, right? So that's pretty much it. And before I finish off this entire video, I would say, generally speaking, in summary, units, team comps, meta, environment, they come and go. They always come and go. And they have been going and coming. They have been coming and going for like the past 2 years. You know? They have been doing this for the past 2 years. And I think, at least for myself, right, I've really gotten used to the games, right? The games where they show an environment. I have been naturally changing my stance on, okay, this is the showed environment and it is not the normal environment anymore. Because after I've been playing like Creator as and all that kind of stuff, I get to play with like the rotation after this rotation. So I have like one rotation forward into the future, right? So because of this, I'm a little bit more like skeptical for any units and their viability because the unit's strength will always be the best at its launch. It really depends on what happens afterwards. That's when you truly test that these units are gonna be worth it for your account. Because unlike like this kind of like, I don't know, PvP gacha games or whatever, right? Live service PvE gacha games, it always revolves around a rotation of endgame mode in this kind of PvE environments where there's gonna be the best slot team. And for units that are not in the best slot team, they still have to be good enough to pull their weight and make your other team comps perform at least to a good degree of performance. If not, maybe even better through some vertical investments. For example, like your E1 Tribi, or even like your E1 Babin, or even some E1 or E2 DPSs if you're really locked in to play that specific DPS. I'm not too sure if this is going to be the case, not just for Hyacine, but for pretty much any of the banners that we've been seeing in version 3, because in version 3 so far, we have seen what? Herda, Agleia, Maide, Castris. We're going to be getting Finon. We're going to be getting Archer, Saber. That's 7 DPS in version 3 so far. 7 different DPS with a single support and a single sustain. So my point is basically, it's almost as if the game is telling you, okay, some things in the banners, they're like options. But some things, there's literally like only that one so far. And it just automatically brings up their value to a higher caliber. So for example, right? For Tribi, do you really think that players need an environment design to shield for Tribi? For players to pull for Tribi? Because I don't think they need to, man. I think anybody that has been playing this game long enough and they understand about meta, they will automatically just pull Tribi regardless because she's just that good. Like, you don't need to shield for a unit specifically just to make them absolutely busted. Ironically or unironically, the more they shield for a specific unit and a specific archetype, it's almost like the harder they fall, you know? It's like what comes up, they have to go down. So for example, right, we've seen the shielding for Super Break for like so long, right? They shield for Super Break for so long in version 2. And the moment they introduced this kind of like toughness, lock mechanics, and kind of stuff, bro, they fell off a lot harder compared to units that didn't receive shielding environments that was like as high. I hope that players can be a bit more aware of like what's going on. Because, yeah, like I mentioned, what comes up, they must go down. And when they go down, it really depends on like how high was like the height for your fall from your peak, right? So that's pretty much it for my final thoughts about Hyacine. Okay, this final thoughts about Hyacine sounds very, very depressing. Just okay, let's end off with a happy note, right? In TLDR, you just pull for Lil Ecap. This is the cutest Mimo sprite in the history of every single Mimo sprite that I've ever seen in my entire life, right? Because of this Mimo sprite alone, she is a must pull, right? Let's end this off on a positive, on a happy note. Yay! Very, very good for Lil Ecap. With that, we have come to the end of my final honest thoughts about Hyacine. Word of the day is gonna be up and down. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter. Use code POKE for 10% off Game Stuff. Use code POKE for 10% off Game Stuff. All the best, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.